Hello, friends. My name is Steve, and welcome to the Friday Conversation, episode 87. Here with some friends today. Really excited to chat. And if you'd like to join any of our episodes, visit our forums at pagetune.com. I'd love to have you. So, Sarah, it's great to see you again. Can you give us an introduction?
Hi, I'm Sarah Chorn, and I write and edit things a lot. I mostly edit. I just write a little bit. So, yeah, that's me.
No big deal, all right?
No big deal.
And Carl.
Yeah, I'm Carl Albert. I am an epic fantasy author of my debut, Truth of Crowns, came out earlier this year. And also I work in entertainment and happy to be done with the strike.
Nice. Yeah, it's great to hear. I want to talk a little bit about AI. We talked a little bit before we started recording about AI, but it's an interesting topic. So it's worth
Absolutely.
exploring. But Sarah, so you're always busy. It seems like you're always working on something or editing. But what are you writing? What can we look forward to in the future? What are you working on for you?
Oh man, I have a book I'm writing that I always say my books are weird, but this one's really, really weird. um,
That worries me a little bit.
I know that's what I keep saying. I don't know when it's going to be too much, but no, this one is set in a completely subterranean world, and it's like populated
Hmm.
with these like rock people, and it's really strange. It's kind of like an anti chosen one story in a way. So, but underground because why not? And that's with rock people. So that's what my next one is. It's called And Then the Light. And yeah, it's really weird. So
I just want to say, so I haven't gotten to read any of your books yet, but I love the titles. Like everything I've seen, you have like just a great like taste for titles.
oh, thank
Like
you.
Necessity of Rain is one of them, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
that's my last one.
love that title. I think it's a beautiful poetic title, and yeah, I guess I'm curious what inspired the work, what you're working on right now.
Um, so I'm kind of a weird writer, and I've learned I have some tendencies. I like to more explore themes than like series, I guess. So if I'm writing a series, I feel too locked into something. I like to bounce around to different themes. If I write something that's too similar to something I just wrote, I kind of get into my own head about it. So I had this idea of an emotional journey I want to go on, and I kind of said, well, it can't be anything like necessity. And since there are so many different elements of the necessity of rain, I realized the only place I could really take this is underground right now. And so I started toying with, well, okay, but how would this work? And then one thing led to another, and now I've got this whole like subterranean rock society that glows underground, and it's really weird. But I have to bounce like that, or I get too stuck in ruts. And so for
Hmm.
me, it was a lot of I can't write anything similar to necessity. So rock people underground is where I'm landing. So yeah,
Very cool.
that's about it. But, yeah.
I'm not a big fan of chosen one. Well, I mean, I think chosen one is okay. Like certain stories work for me, certain ones don't. But what made you write an anti chosen one story? What kind of inspired that?
I'm really interested in how we all feel like we're the center of our own worlds. And we are. Like, my day completely goes on like normal, and somewhere in the world, someone is experiencing the worst tragedy that will ever happen to them right now. And so for me, my day's fine, and for theirs, their whole world might be ending, and I
Hmm.
would never know. And that interests me. And there's so many like chosen ones in fantasy where these people start small and get big. And the idea of flipping that on its head and exploring the emotions of starting big and then naturally winnowing yourself to realize that, I'm actually not this huge thing. I'm actually just one small part of the whole, and that's fine. That's an emotional journey for me that's really interesting. And I don't really, I don't know. I write for emotional journeys more than plot. Like I figure out the story I kind of want to tell in my head. I like the idea of that. And then I figure out the story I can tell that will support the emotional journey I want to take people on. And that just kind of makes sense to me. It's always a process of kind of narrowing yourself down, but in the best ways to figure out who you are, I guess. I
That's
don't
very
know.
cool. And that does sound like a powerful, certainly relatable emotional journey. Very interesting one. I think it's something that a lot of people kind of experience as they grow up. Because certainly when you're a child, like, you're not necessarily aware of like the wider world, not as aware as certainly as you become. And having that sort of self-realization is a powerful thing. I'm curious, you're an editor. You edit a lot of books, as you said. That's most of what you do. What do you do? Like, who do you go to edit your books? Do you get your books edited? Like, what's your journey there?
Oh yeah, I definitely get my books edited. My editor's Nathan Hall, and
Oh, okay.
he's amazing. He gets exactly how I operate. So I will be stuck with him until one of us dies, and hopefully that's not going to be for a while. But yeah, he's great. I have to get my stuff edited. I Everyone has their own things. I really struggle because I'm not a plot writer. I'm an emotion writer. So for me, I really need someone there to help me get my plot to a point where people understand that there's a plot here. So, things make sense in your head, and then it doesn't quite translate outside of your head. And you just need someone else there to help get this stuff out to everyone else, because this is a mess. And the people can't do this. This is crazy. So but yeah, that's where he comes in. He helps sort me out and line me up and get me where I need to be.
You mentioned you're an emotion writer, and I have a bone to pick with you because Seraphina's Lament was one of the very few books that I had to set down and like walk around and just like get it down. So definitely, yeah, you're definitely an emotion writer.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely think more in emotional beats. I've always been more interested by our inner journeys than our outer ones.
That's awesome. So, do you feel that that's one of the specialties you bring to editing too? Is really like drilling down to your authors, like the emotional journeys in their books, or like what do you feel are your particular strengths as an editor?
Um, I think my biggest one is probably with line editing. I can line edit in my sleep, and I love it. And it's the thing about editing I love the most. Lines are like a puzzle, and I'm fascinated by how you can change one word in a scene and change the entire dynamic of the scene. And that I love that. Just chasing the little dominoes through a book is where um that's what does it for me. I think with plot, I am good with details, the small things that help support the larger things, the things that a lot of people overlook. And a lot of times there's emotional imbalances and things like that. And yes, I do get a lot of people who come to me who are like, I really need help with getting these emotions across. So I think that's probably a thing too. I know I'm really good at helping you twist the knife. That's yes.
What are ways that you can, if someone came to you and said, I need help conveying emotion with this scene or with this with this plot line or whatever it may be, what are ways that you can convey emotion that when it's not there, the story's there, but you need emotion? How can you weave that in?
One of the biggest pitfalls people use is telling the reader what the character is feeling instead of letting them feel it. And so my first thing I always say is I'll highlight a section and say, okay, how can you tell me that she's upset without ever using the word upset? So take this section and show me upset. Don't tell me, don't use the word, don't go anywhere near the word, just show me what upset looks like on her. Let me figure it out as I read. So the second, usually, you reframe it like that, and then it kind of frees something up in the author's mind. We get so set on these emotion words. And usually I have to tell someone, but the way you're going to react to this situation, the way you feel upset is going to be different than the way I feel upset. And it's going to be way different than the way this character feels upset. So upset is the umbrella. And what we need to do is get to the rain, I guess. We need to see what's there. And it needs some personal experience that as soon as you stop defining it by a word, it usually gets freed up a bit in the author's mind. It's a matter of just conveying. It's a matter usually of just showing me what it looks like. Like, it'll mean a lot more to me as a reader if I can experience this character's reaction to some bad news as they react to it. The shock, and then the horror, and then the what? And then, and then the crying and all this stuff. Bring me through that cycle, but don't ever use the words to narrow it down like that. Just bring me through it. I want to feel it with them, and to do that, you need to let me experience it as they do.
That's a brilliant piece of advice. It's something that I think it is tricky. When you're in the moment writing, sometimes like I mean, at least like less experienced writers, and like I've had my moments struggling with this, where you kind of just want to just like tell it, like put it on the page, and like being able to pull back and be like, okay, like what is the physical reality of that moment for the character, like I think back to a scene late in my book that I'm particularly proud of, and actually it didn't exist until the final draft, that it's never said. It's a scene of grieving, and it's never like that word is never used. Like it's just about like that, the physical actions and what's happening to the character, and like dropping an item of certain significance and things like that. And I think it's a tricky, important thing that I think is really interesting that you highlighted.
Well, there's also something I've noticed is an imbalance, and I think this is true for all of us. And it's another thing that when I point it out, there's usually an "oh, okay, I understand" moment, but it's always more intense to us. We're always going to feel it more as the author because it's inside of us. This is our world. It's our baby. It's our brainchild. It's there, but you lose. It's like driving a car out of the parking lot, of the dealer. You automatically lose some of the car's value. And that's kind of the emotional intensity equation. The second it leaves your brain, you're going to lose some of the emotional intensity because the car's out of the lot, and that's just how it works. It's going to be more powerful to us than anyone else. And so there's this thing where authors will start writing, and I'll see them really getting into the emotions of it. And then there's always this moment where they just stop and completely pull back. And I can point it out in every manuscript and highlight that moment. And it's the moment when they're worried that it's too intense. And I always have to tell them, there's this equation. You've driven a car out of the lot. The moment you hit that point where you're like, is this too intense? It might be to you, but to the reader, you're just hitting their level. You're just getting to the point where you're getting the car out to them, and they're going to start driving it around. It's this question of intensity, and it scares people to write intense stuff because to write it, you have to feel it, and that's scary and hard with a lot of this stuff because we don't write easy things. That's not what we do. And so once you see, well, this is the point where I'm pulling back because I'm nervous and I'm going to overwhelm people. And once I say, no, this is the point where you're just getting to where I'm going to feel it, then it kind of frees up the author a bit, and they seem to be a little less reluctant to lean into things. It's just, you don't really think about it until you see it from the outside. It's always going to be more intense to you than it will be to me. And if you want to make me cry, well, you're almost there, but here's a way you can twist the knife just a little bit more. and then I'll really cry, and that'll be awesome.
Twist the knife. How much how much back and forth do you have when you're editing and when you send kind of ideas or feedback? You typically, how many times do you have that exchange for a normal, typical book?
It really depends on the author. Some of them like a lot of it. Some of them just want to hear from me when they send me the book and when I send it back.
Hmm.
Most of them will stay in touch though, and they'll tell me like what's going on. And but everyone works differently. Some people just don't like to be bothered. Some people like a lot of back and forth. If I have to do extensive developmental work, I'll usually have more one-on-ones with authors than if it's just like a line edit and polishing type thing.
Is it hard when someone asks you for a line edit and you go through and you, well, this can, and I'm sure your editor brain goes to, you could really change this section, or you can make the, does it hard to not provide that feedback for them when you're going
I
through?
always do
Oh, do you?
anyway. I always do. If I feel like if I see something, even if it's not like technically my job right then to fix it, I feel like I should mention it just because maybe the other one didn't notice, or maybe I see things differently, or maybe it's just something the author hasn't considered yet. But yeah, if I see it, I'll say it. It's just I feel like that's professional courtesy.
I bet that'd be tough. And I wonder with your own books, I wonder if you, when you have ideas, if you think, no, that's too much like this book that I read a year or two ago or edited a month ago. Do you have that struggle in your own brain when you come up with ideas and think, no, that's too close to something else? Because I'm sure you read a ton, you edit a ton, you interact a ton. So is that tough to kind of separate and not want to do something that's already in your brain?
Well, I think that's why I write really weird stuff. I think a lot of it is a reaction to my editing. Like, because I'm a huge pantser. I don't plot anything. I can't do it. I go into a book when I have a feeling and I leave it when I stop having a feeling. And anything between the 2 points is, I mean, I don't know. So it's, so I go into it like that. And I recently had this revelation where I was like, I think I pants so hard because when I edit, I have to be so structured. And then I started looking into the whole thing, and I'm like, and I think I write weird books because literally nothing I edit is like any of the. I mean, I've never, in all of my time editing, read a book about subterranean rock people that glow. I just haven't done it. So I think a lot of my writing is a reaction to my editing. I just go as far away from any of that as I can in my creative process.
What do you read? Like separate from, the editing, like do you read a lot of fantasy outside of editing, or like what is your escape? What are the things you enjoy to do when you're not editing?
I don't read a ton of fantasy anymore outside of editing, and it's just because I edit so much that I get burnt out on it a bit. When I read a lot of historical nonfiction. My after work relaxing hobby right now has been listening to true crime podcasts and coloring. So that's my after work thing. But yeah.
True crime seems to be all the rage these days, for sure.
I like the stories, and they're all dark, and people die, and it's just enough,
They got everything you could want.
Exactly. I mean, blood and guts and misery, it's wonderful.
And color, what do you like to color? It's like one of those things that I was in Barnes and Noble the other day. Oh, you're okay.
Uh-oh. There we are. We have you.
Yeah, we're good. Yeah. I was in Barnes and Noble the other day, and there was some really cool coloring books there, like adult coloring books. And I was like, that looks like fun. I thought the last thing I need is another hobby, so I better not. But what got you into coloring?
I don't know. I honestly don't have a clue. I used to read after work, and then I started doing this full time, and I realized I can't read after work because I read for work, and that's just a lot. And I needed something. I don't have a clue what brought me into it. I just ordered a book and some pencils one day, and I've been doing it for a few years now, and I have some people who want me to color a children's book and stuff. So. Wow. it's grown, and it's been nice. I enjoy it, but yeah, it's fun.
So, what was your journey to get into editing? Like, how did you get started with that?
I started reviewing books in 2010 on my website, and it was my last semester in college, and I'd saved all my crap classes for then because I knew I'd be sick of it. So I had no homework and I had nothing to do, and suddenly I had all this time to read. So I started reading again, and I realized nobody cared about talking about books, and I was very excited. So I started a website where I could go and talk about the stuff I was reading and pretend like someone cared. And I did that for a while, and it was, I think, 2019, 2018, no, the winter of 2018, when an author contacted me and they sent me a book, and they said, "How much do you charge for an edit?" And I said, "I don't edit." And he said, "Well, now you do. Let's see what you can do." And that's how it started. That's how I literally fell into it. And then it's just kind of grown from there.
That's amazing. Wow.
Yeah,
You do
that's
now.
pretty awesome.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Was it just like the author was so impressed by like your insight in the reviews and was like, I want this person to edit my book. Like she knows, what
I
she's
think
talking about.
literally thought I was an editor.
Oh
I,
wow.
I
Yeah.
think he really did, because he was talking to me about all this stuff, and at the time I had no idea when any of the developmental edit, none of it. I had no idea, and so I took it to a friend who was an editor, and I was like, "What the hell is this?" And he was like, "Oh, he thinks you're an editor," and so I had to email him back, and I was like, "I'm not an editor." And he was like, "Well, that's dumb." And so we were friends. But yeah, I think he really thought I was one. So yeah, it worked out.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
How long after that first one did you get the second one? Like, but did he tell someone else and it just kind of snowballed, or how did that work?
A little bit. I told a friend that I was trying out editing with this book, and then she told some of her friends, and so that's kind of how it started. So
What advice do you have, or do you give to your authors when, like, do you give any advice beyond just like the editing that you're hired for, like whether it's marketing or anything like that, or just career advice? Is there anything there that you like to share with your authors?
I pass on information when I can. I've helped a few of them find agents and, stuff like that. So I try to pass the word on when I can. I try and cheerlead them. I go into it where I want someone behind me as an author, like someone who's firmly in my court. And so for me, that's what I try to give all my authors to, is someone who's firmly in their court. And that's a cheerleader, and that's someone to talk to. And, that's all of that. I get asked marketing advice, and I always tell them to talk to Ryan Cahill, because I don't have a clue. I don't market my own books. I don't know. So talk to that guy, and he's nice. So go talk to him. And then and that's about as far as I get into marketing. But yeah.
I've gone to Ryan's like videos, his interviews and stuff all the time for just like trying to learn and absorb. I mean, because clearly he knows what he's doing. Like, he's had wild success, and
And
like
he's
you
so
said,
nice. I'll
yeah,
pop him with questions all the time. Like, I know you're super busy, Mr. International Bestseller, but if you can come out of your hobbit hole and answer this question, I'd appreciate it. And, and he's really nice. He's a good guy, but yeah, he knows what he's doing. He definitely does.
What have you picked up from him, Carl? Like, just from kind of insights?
yeah. So I mean, I no joke. Literally earlier today, I was watching one of his. I'm not done with it. I have it pulled up in another tab, an interview on YouTube, and I remember when I was like starting out, getting ready to launch my book. I mean, I think I first discovered him through, it was either Patrick Leo's channel or Mike's book reviews, and I just thought he seemed like he really knew what he was talking about. Whether it was the sort of thing that, like, have the right cover for your genre and things like that. And I was always curious to kind of see what other indie authors were doing, and I was trying to do a lot of research, which is one of the pieces of advice he always gives, is just like do your research, make sure you know what you're getting into, and so yeah, the cover thing. What was the other? I mean, making sure that you get edited. I mean, some of this stuff is like, when you sit back, it's like, oh, it's obvious advice.
He always frames it really well, though.
Yes,
I
he
think
does.
He has a real way of making these concepts less scary, because that's part of why I don't market. It scares me. I don't like it. And he just has a way of making it seem like, oh, well, that's common sense. Like with my last book, I asked him, I have an author's note at the start of it, and that was a real debate for me because it was like this big personal thing. And his advice to me when I talked to him was, well, part of selling a book is selling yourself. And so if you put this in there, then you're not only selling the book, but you're selling yourself. And people are going to be more interested in it because it's personal. So you'll engage them in you, and then they'll be engaged in the book. And if he hadn't have said that, and I hadn't have thought, oh, yeah, that's right, that's exactly right, then it wouldn't be there. And it's been something that I've noticed has really helped connect people to the work. So it was really smart. And I never would have done it if he hadn't have just been like, well, this... you're selling yourself, and that's, smart. So
absolutely. And another little thing is at the end in the, just somewhere at the end in the acknowledgments or wherever, putting forth a really heartfelt, ask for, check out my social media, leave a review, that sort of thing. Because especially as an indie author, you're on your own effectively, and you have to do everything yourself. And, you're an entrepreneur, and so you need to push every little avenue you can. And I thought that was really shrewd. And I'm sure there's so many little pieces of advice that I am just blanking on. And like I said, I'm constantly trying to learn and like piece together, I'm just at the start of my career here. And what's funny is, he's only a few years into this now. Like, he launched his career in the middle of COVID. So, but he's already found so much success, and I imagine he's still, learning every day. And so he's definitely someone that I look to, and I think is interesting to follow, and just to piece together things from his career. Another person I look to who admittedly had a very different path is Brandon Sanderson. And that maybe seems sort of almost ludicrous because, one, he's trad published, and two, he's the biggest fantasy author in the world right now. But he knows how to market himself in his books and has been good at that for years and years and years. And has basically he credits that in big part to his success, is that, he has a level of business acumen that not a lot of writers do. And so even if it's not advice he gives, but just seeing the things he's doing, and finding your own personal platform and a way to connect to your audience and your readership, I think is, like you said, Sarah, having that level of personal connection, I think really speaks to readers and helps them connect to you and want to root for you and invest in your books. And that's the sort of thing that I am really trying to pursue. And TikTok has been one of the big avenues for me. I know I saw, Book Talk was a huge thing. I worked at Barnes & Noble for a while, a few years ago. And that was just sort of right around the time that we would start having these, tables with Book Talk faves. And I had avoided TikTok at all costs. I had until I really started pursuing this career a few months ago, and it has been huge. I would say 70% of the books I've sold, and admittedly I haven't sold that many books, but 70% of them came from TikToks I've made. I can see direct, not just correlation, but causation. So you got to find platform. You got to find your outlet, your way to connect with readers, because it's huge.
Yeah.
So we should expect a video of you dancing with your book sometime soon then?
Oh God. So part of my problem is I'm still figuring out like how to actually make TikToks, and like where to like I shake. I have a tremor, like just muscular skeletal issues, and so like I can't just like casually hold it without like causing like a hurricane on my phone. And so I have to figure out like ways to like balance things, or if I can get someone else to film me. And so many of the trends that you see, I haven't yet figured out a way to do it. I don't have a mic. And so I can't like just put my phone somewhere, and like have a separate microphone recording me. But God, I would love to like jump on, the trends and start dancing and doing all the silly stuff, because that would certainly give me a lot more freedom. It's so hard to like constantly come up with new, like little, like what do I talk about for like 15 to 60 seconds? Like what am I pitching? I don't just want to like keep being like, go buy my book. Like what do you say? What new thing do you bring to the table, so you're not just repeating yourself? And oh man, it's tough.
Yeah,
it's scary too. I will admit. Sarah, I'm right there with you in terms of like marketing is not something that comes naturally to me. Like it makes me very uncomfortable, like advocating for myself or my work in that way. Like I get really excited talking about the things I've written. Like I like talking about the writing process, but I don't like it when I feel like I'm selling something. I don't like it when I feel like I'm like pushing something on someone. So it's a tough thing, finding that, especially as an introverted person, like the ways to go out and just put yourself out there. It's tough.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it seems like marketing is. It seems like writing the book and that whole process is like half the work, and then the other half is marketing. It's just like terrifying.
Yeah.
So yeah, it must be kind of nice to Sarah to say, you know what, if you want to know marketing advice, talk to this person, because that's like such a loaded question that you can spend the whole day talking about that if you wanted to.
Yeah. At this point, I usually know a point person to send someone for just about anything. So.
Does Ryan ever say, don't send them my way anymore, Sarah? They're too many DMs.
No, thankfully, no. But
what impact, if any, have you found your editing has had, both on your writing process, but also on, does it correlate at all to like sales for you? Have you found that like just the fact that you're like an editor and connect with these authors has like helped you kind of quietly promote your books or yourself? Like what impact has your editing had on your career as a writer?
I learn something from everyone I work with. So my writing style never stays the same. Everyone has something they do really well, and they do different from everyone else. And so I'm kind of always going through a process of, okay, so this is how I can tell a story. And I think it allows me, in a way, to push the kind of stories that I tell. Like The Necessity of Rain, I don't think would have happened if it hadn't have been for years of editing experience first. Just seeing so many people's different stories and figuring out a very atypical one to tell, a way to tell my own. That was all based on things I learned from my authors who are very talented. So, in that respect, it impacts my writing a lot. For sales, no, it hasn't impacted them at all. I'm not a big mover and shaker with sales. I don't market my stuff. I feel really weird even talking about it much. So usually I'll publish a book and I won't even ever mention it again. And I don't ask them to read my stuff because I feel like that's weird. So I try to keep my editing and writing side very separate. And I tell people all the time, editor Sarah, she matters because that's where I do like all the important stuff. And writer Sarah is kind of like obscure. And I don't, that part of me doesn't quite matter as much, but I also don't do much to move the needle on that. I don't go out and actively look for a ton of readers and stuff. I figure my stuff's weird, so I don't know who would want to read it. So anyway, that's where I am. I don't want to bug people. That's basically my book sales. The motto is I don't want to bug people. I don't want to bug my authors. I don't want to bug the general public. I just don't want to bug people. You're all busy, live your lives, and if you read it, that's great.
So, well, I mean, I love Seraphina's Lament. It's one of my favorite books of last year, but I've recommended it to a few other people who really loved it, and they keep asking me, when is book 2 coming?
I don't know. I have a novella I've been tinkering with in that world. It's been hard to get back into it. There's some things I'm debating with Seraphina's Lament. I don't know. That one is up in the air. I don't quite know where I want the story to go. I've talked a bit with my editor about it, but it's still one I feel like I need to let it percolate a bit. I don't know. Well, one of my issues is I feel like my writing style's changed so much since then that I almost feel like I'd have to re-edit that book, like for lines at least, to make a more current version of it. And then I'm like, I don't know if that would be worth it. So I don't know. That one's up in the air. I've learned I like to write standalones more than I like to write series. And that's another issue I've had, is going back to a series makes me feel kind of trapped. Like there are all these shiny things out there that I'm having fun with right now. So I don't know. We'll see.
Well, cross my fingers, but
Yeah, that one's been hard. That book has a lot of baggage, so it's been kind of difficult for me to get back to it.
Being such an emotional writer, I bet there's other emotions wrapped into that. And it's kind of like it's a time capsule in a way. Some of your work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's definitely the interesting thing about writing, and I think this is probably true with any art or any craft, that, like you said, Steve, something you create, it really is a time capsule of like who you are in that moment. One of the most interesting things for just me personally throughout the process of writing my debut was I wrote it over 6 years, and I changed a lot over those 6 years. A lot happened. I started it before my sophomore year of college, and I just published it last May after a pandemic and the most serious relationship of my life up to that point, and a couple deaths and like any number of things. And you change a lot, and even just like you said, Sarah, as a writer, like your style changes, and it is hard to, in the moment, I think, sort of be fully aware of what all an individual like work says about you, or what all it reflects about you. But like in hindsight, it definitely is a really interesting thing to look back on and like see where you were then and what you were interested in, and what that piece of writing, like what that reflects from inside you. It's a weird little thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all pieces of ourselves.
I'm assuming you both find writing to be therapeutic. Is that fair to say, based on this conversation?
Yeah, for me, it's cheaper than therapy, so that helps.
It definitely, there's an aspect to it that's therapeutic. I mean, there are some days where it's like all the metaphors that come to my mind are deeply inappropriate. But needless to say, painful. There are just days where I just like, it's the last thing, whether because I'm like, not feeling great that day, or, I'm just tired, or any number of things, or I'm struggling with, it's something I've actually been dealing with recently, is like, I'm like beating my head against the wall, like trying to figure out how to make this chapter work. And it's not so pleasant then, but there certainly is an aspect of writing where it's like you're working out your views of the world and your emotions and expressing yourself maybe in ways that you wouldn't do in your day-to-day life. Like I think there's even aspects in my writing of ways that like I actively go to therapy every week or every other week now. There was a period where I was going every week. And I think that there are things that I like hadn't or haven't or wouldn't even say in therapy that like in some ways comes out in my writing. And almost because there's like a level of distance where it's like, well, it's not me saying it, you know, it's like, it's these characters, or like, even if you're not, or they're not directly saying it, it's, you know, it's like what Sarah was talking about earlier, like showing the emotion and showing like that level of like inner reality that is very cathartic and impactful. And certainly I find to be the more pleased I am with my writing. I mean, sometimes it just comes down to like having a cool reveal or something, or like, you know, working up to a twist or something like that. But I think really the number one thing that's most impactful is when those moments of like inner catharsis like come out on the page and you're like speaking to some truth about yourself that maybe you don't say day to day, you know, you don't express, that's just you live with and maybe aren't even always aware of until you've written it.
Yeah, I had a lot of that with The Necessity of Rain. That was a big part of like Rosemary's disability experience, was I would write and then I would write something and it would just be like, it would just floor me and I'd have to walk away from the book for a few days and just kind of process it because it would resonate with some truth, you know, something I've felt or thought or wanted to say and never have. And I'd be like, holy shit, that's groundbreaking, you know, and I'd have to walk away and I'd have to process it. And then I'd go back to the book and it would happen again. The whole book was written like that. It was just written with little spurts and then I'd have to stop and I'd be like, whoa. And then where did that come from? And then I'd process it and I'd go back to it until the next whoa moment. And it was the whole thing was like that. But by the end of it, I felt like I had purged something, and that was quite nice. And I wouldn't have got that any other way. Not therapy or anything else would have given me the same cathartic experience of digging this stuff out of the mire of my swamp soul and thrusting it out into the light. There's something purifying about it, about, you know, making yourself see yourself like that.
Absolutely. I had a similar experience with Truth of Crowns, that there's a character who I've talked about this kind of briefly on the podcast that's like inspired by my own health issues and things like that, my own disability, that like I remember there's this one speech in particular that like what was placed in the book changed a few times. It was always kind of in the back half, but you know, you rewrite things, but it always, like, the wording never really changed because it just like spoke to something that I'd never actually expressed before, and was so cathartic to write out on the page. And it was like, it's not a pleasant thing either. Like, no, it's a deeply unpleasant thing.
Yeah, sometimes it hurts a lot when that happens.
And it's like you said, it's like you're, you know, I mean, the word catharsis, like, you know, literally means like a release, you know, and it really is. You're letting go of something, like you're releasing something that is really, I mean, I guess to circle back, therapeutic, and just like hopefully emotionally engaging with an audience, you know, and it hopefully speaks to some truth about you know, the character certainly in the world, and certainly you as a person, like as an author. Yeah.
It's a powerful experience when stuff resonates like that.
Have either of you ever written something and been like, I can't, even though someone like me, just a reader, would never know what it was referring to in your own experience or in the way that you felt like it was released for you, no one else would ever know, but do you ever hesitate to release it or to make it public because it's too much? Like you felt like you like exposed almost, like it's too personal, even though no one else would ever realize it?
Well, my entire last book was like that, and I was going to be really quiet about it, and then I decided I just can't be because it's a little too obvious. But yeah, it was really hard. I had a long think with myself about whether I wanted to be that vulnerable in front of other people. And I decided to run with it, and it's worked for me. But it's also been like one of the weirdest experiences because the book hasn't really taken off extremely, a lot. I haven't done much to move the marker either. But it's kind of quiet, and it's been amazing to me how many of the people who have read it have ended up emailing me with very personal, private, profound experiences. And it's always very humbling. But it was scary, and it's still scary. And I spent like I gave myself a September 1st deadline because I was so nervous about this book. And so I gave myself till September 1st to decide if I was going to keep it published or not. That's how nervous I was. And I literally had the date in my calendar, and it was going to be, I have to decide between publication and September 1st if I'm comfortable with this being in the world. And I decided to let it roll. But it was not always going to be that way. Like when I first published the book, I immediately regretted it. I was terrified because it's just that personal. So for me, that one was my big one. But I've survived, and I was going to be very secret about, well, this is just a weird thing she wrote, but with Rosemary's disability and stuff, I just couldn't. It's too obvious. But I gifted her my disability, so it's, at a certain point, either own it or don't. And so I decided to just, jump. But yeah, that was mine. It was terrifying. And even if it's not a personal book, you spent years on it. It was born inside your brain, and your gray matter birthed this thing. There's a unique vulnerability in being an author. In every step of the process, you not only have to love your own work, but you have to realize that it's also not good enough. And that's why we need editors and stuff. And so you have this weird warring thing where we're all like, we're awesome, we do this cool thing, and look at how talented I am. And on the other side, we're all so insecure because it's terrifying. Whether or not it's an emotionally vulnerable book, or if it's some fun romp through a dungeon, the minute it hits the shelves, it's not your book anymore. And that's terrifying. It's a unique vulnerability involved in being any kind of an artist, I think. And I mean, some of us thrive and some of us drop books and walk away from them because it's scary. So, we all have our different ways of doing this.
I think a lot of what you just said, Sarah, rings very true to me. To answer your question, Steve, from my own personal experience, there certainly are, if I've written something, I've already decided that I am comfortable putting it out there to a degree, for me personally. But there's a lot of before I write the words, before I follow this storyline. Am I comfortable doing that? There was a lot of that in Truth of Crowns, and continuing it's a series. It's book one in a series that there are parts of me that I'm like, do I want to put that on the page? Do I feel like, some of that is because maybe it reflects relationships I have in real life, or have had. Some of it is just a matter of, I guess it all comes down to sort of my own emotional experiences. And so there absolutely are times where I don't want to say censor is such a strong word, but where I have avoided. There are lines I won't cross, at least at this point in my life, just because I feel it isn't appropriate or anything, or like I'm not yet comfortable sharing certain things or things like that. At the same time, I very much am of the opinion that a lot of the best works of art come out of that vulnerability and that willing to share the most innermost parts of ourselves, sometimes consciously, sometimes subconsciously. And that a lot of that came into why I, wrote some of the things I did in Truth of Crowns, whether it be writing about disability or sexuality or trauma, that there was just a level where I was like, this is how to tell a good story, is like, you just have to be vulnerable. And like Sarah said, anything you write, there's a level of emotional vulnerability because art is so personal, and like you put something out there and, you're both like, oh, I'm just good at this. Like, that's why I put this out there. And you're also like, I'm the worst writer in the world. Like, everyone's going to realize I'm a hack fraud and I should never write another word in my life. And, it's that dichotomy that you just live with constantly. Neil Gaiman talks about it all the time.
It never goes away either. No. And I always thought when I was editing, well, eventually I'll see a tier of author who makes enough money they know that they're good at what they do. And I've worked with international bestsellers and New York Times bestsellers and everything at this point, and every last one of them have these same insecurities. It's just part of it. You either learn to live with it or like some way to deal with it, or it's because it's part of the deal, I think.
And I think one of the things that I am still most uncomfortable with, and thankfully haven't experienced yet, is the fear that someone will misinterpret something or not even, because a reader's interpretation is their own, but will misinterpret intent, on the author's part. Because I certainly have seen that, I believe, with certain books, certain movies, shows, whatever, that other people have made. And because there is that level of vulnerability, particularly the most vulnerable things that I've written, I worry, times like, oh, are they going to take this the wrong way? Or is this going to, are they going to think I'm like going for the complete reverse of what I'm going for? Or, like you express something that like to you is clearly a negative and they're going to take it as like you promoting this thing or anything like that. And I actually saw it happen to a friend of mine who talked about body positivity and her own experience with her weight and things like that. And there were readers who thought like her main character was like expressing that insecurity, and they attacked her and were like, you're being fat phobic, you're being like any number of things. And it really, messed her up. And I talked to her about it, and I just like, I felt bad, and I worry about that sort of thing happening with my work, but at the same time, you just like can't, that like comes with the territory. Like you can't control how people react. So, it's a give and take in that regard. I don't even know what the point of this was. I sort of wandering around, but it's a scary thing. It's a scary thing putting yourself out there.
Yeah, it definitely is.
So I can never be a writer because I would take reviews way too hard.
I stopped looking at them, and that helped a lot. Like when you stop paying as much attention to that, then it helps. But for me, it was an equation of, because I get too locked in the rat race of looking at everyone else and wondering why they're special and I'm not. That whole thing online that I think every author does. Even if we don't admit it, we all have a list of authors we look at and wonder, why are they fancy and I'm not? So, I get too sucked into that. And so for me, it became kind of almost a mental health thing. If I am going to keep writing as something I love doing, then I can't have the joy sucked out of it. And having the joy sucked out of it is watching other people and wishing I was them. And that's not fun for me. That makes me feel, this big. And I don't like that. So I had to kind of remove that, and checking reviews was part of it. That was definitely. So now I only read them if people ping me in them. I don't pay attention. And it's helped a lot. But I make my income editing. I don't make my income writing. And I don't want a second, full-time job. So I'm pretty content where I'm at. So that's also not a huge consideration. Whereas like my best-selling authors don't have that luxury. They have to stay on top of all of it all the time because it's their income and that matters. So I have like this freedom with that, this wiggle room that allows me to say, well, this doesn't make me happy, so I don't have to do it. I can just write them and let it happen on its own. I can walk away from that whole thing and I feel fine about that. Whereas a bunch of my other authors, most of them, I'd say, in fact, probably all of them, because I'm weird, probably don't fit in that. So it's also like a personal calculation thing, and mine was just different. And for me, I could cut that and be happy. But it makes me feel better also boosting other people more than boosting myself. So it allows me more time to focus on the cool things my authors are doing and to, say, hey, you need to check out this person. And that is where I'd rather spend my energy than sitting there wondering why I'm not more like so-and-so author. Because chances are so-and-so author is also looking at someone else wondering why they're not like them either. So it's kind of like this chain event. So for me, I just had to cut myself out of it. But yeah.
Sounds like the healthy option there, just to stay away.
It's been hard. This year, I think it's been especially hard for a lot of authors because I feel like certain things have changed on certain social platforms and have made them a lot less friendly. And that's been this year. This year, especially, I've been really hard on the I'm only going to talk about things that make me happy because I think the world is miserable enough. And if we're not celebrating the things that we do that are really cool, what are we doing? Why are we here? It's like,
Amen.
What is the point? Yeah. So that's been my focus. I don't want to be miserable. And so the way to not be miserable is to focus on stuff that makes me happy.
Another good rule of thumb, for sure. Yeah.
Agreed.
And then that's my speech for I don't know where the hell that was going, but here we are.
No, I think it's so wise and just it's healthy. That's how I try to be too. I just don't have nearly enough reviews to have been impacted one way or another. But so I still look at them is basically what I'm saying. And it's I know I'm going to have to get to a point where I stop, but I am not at that point yet. And I had to make this decision after my first book released. And so I did this like years ago. It was as soon as Seraphina's Lament released, I started getting really wrapped up in why am I not as cool as this author? And I hated the way that made me feel. And so very early on, I just decided I can't do that. It really does something to my head. So that was a move I made very early on. And I don't write normal things anyway. So for me, I don't have a huge market because I ask people what genre do I write in, and I will watch them all fight about it. So like nobody knows. I don't know. I'm just kind of out here doing my weird thing. And so I don't know. I think I'm happier out here doing my weird thing for me. But my calculation's different, and that's something every author is going to have to make on their own, and it's from, the ground floor up. Am I going trad? Am I not? Am I doing this? Am I doing that? It's always just a decision of what calculus it's better for you and where you see yourself. There's no right and wrong. I do think that just the comparison, like comparing yourself to other authors it's one of the most dangerous things. And it's one of the things, honestly, that I have found most difficult about marketing on social media, particularly certain platforms that should not be named, that like it becomes so easy to do that,
Yeah.
and it's I'm right there with you, Sarah, that like I hate it. I hate the way it makes me feel, and so still trying to find that balance of like putting myself out there, but not putting myself in a position where I constantly feel competitive or, insecure or anything like that, because it impacts the writing. Like, it gets harder to write where you're like, what am I even doing? Like, how do I sell this book? How do I connect with a readership? How do I put myself out there? Like I was in Spiffbo, and like, that was one of the things that was like hard, is like, you're putting yourself out there with 299 other books. And it's like, it's hard not to compare yourself. I mean, especially when you're in literally a competition, it's inherently competitive, but there's so much you can't control about it too, right? Like you have no idea where your book's going to end up. And it's a tough thing to like be engaged, but also to not fall into bad, unhealthy habits emotionally.
I think some authors do it really well. And I think the really approachable ones who moderate their time are usually the ones that I look at and think, you're doing it right. And then there's some that like try to be edgelord to get views.
Yes.
And I always feel like that's hard. Because the first thing you're going to do is divide your audience. So the second you have an opinion that half the people who see it aren't going to like, you're going to have half the people who are like, I'm not really interested. And that's hard. And that's something, some people can do that and it's fine. For me, it would give me massive amounts of anxiety. I'm much more like, let's just drift along and help each other. This is cool. So there's different paths people take, and it's really hard. And then there's been, I catch a lot of, not a lot, but I do get some very angry people about the disability and LGBTQ rep in my books. And that always makes it hard. That always kind of, every time one of those letters comes, I always kind of sit there and think, it always kind of spins me out for a few days, and I have to recalibrate why I'm doing this. And so there's other considerations too. It's not easy. I mean, it's a jungle out there. And I think in general, we forget that there are other people sitting on the other side of the computer. And we're all dealing with our own little tragedies every day and our own little victories. And I tell my kids all the time, kindness is cheap. And as soon as I started more living that way, it really helped a lot. And, for me, trying to spread the enthusiasm for my authors who are doing amazing things will always feel better to me than saying, buy my book. And so that's where I decided, for me, I'd rather put my focus there, because people will find my books if they want to, and that's fine. I welcome new readers all the time. I would love new readers. I would love it if people read my stuff. But for me, being part of the community, I feel better trying to boost it as a whole. I feel like that boosts me more than, standing there saying, I hate this thing and buy my book, please. Which I feel like that's what a lot of social media has become. So maybe if we could all be a little nicer, I don't know. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there's been some, just recently, the last month or so, there's been some things people that I've not interacted with too much, but that seem like good. And that you hate to see people disagree, and you hate to see those kind of things happen, because it's just unfortunate. So,
well, I think there's so much that's up in the air right now, especially in publishing. Things are changing, and it makes everyone kind of on a hair trigger. Yeah, and that doesn't help. And then people get wrapped up in things in their own lives, and it's always just easier to. And nobody's perfect. We've all stepped in it. And, all we can do is, I always tell my kids, we can always start over. Today does not set the rest of it. And I feel like giving people grace isn't a bad thing.
Right. Yeah.
Agreed 1,000%.
Yeah. But speaking of changes in publishing, I was wondering, have you, I know with AI is a big issue now, and I wonder if you've received a book, you don't have to mention any names or anything, but I was wondering, have you received a book or books that you think this is an AI book or it just doesn't feel right? Have you experienced much of that?
I haven't yet. Not yet, but an editor I work with did not too long ago. I put up an anti-AI policy, like I will not touch AI books, and if I feel like this might have AI, then I'll walk away from it. I did that early on. I know with some small publications I've worked with, they've shut their doors to submissions just because they can't. It's hard. You can't, the technology to track this stuff isn't up to AI itself yet. And most of these places don't have the staff or money. So like potential legal issues are a big concern.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's changed a lot of publishing anyway. And it's been tense this year, I think. And I think we'll come around to it. I had someone in publishing I was talking to about this was like, well, everyone felt this way about the internet when it first came out too, and it's still here. So I think I think what we're going to see is parameters starting to be set around AI. And I think once we kind of start seeing the legal framework for some of these lawsuits that are rolling through right now, then we'll lose a lot of the Wild West feel to all this. And we'll start understanding more about where we are and where we're going and, you know, what the limits and what the possibilities. Because AI is not going anywhere. And I think there are very real, very positive implications of this technology, especially with like medical technology. For example, I have electrodes in my spine, which are the only thing that keep me walking right now. And right now they're Bluetooth. So I go into the doctor once a year and the doctor connects the iPad to my spine. And then he recalibrates it and I can feel where the electrodes are triggering in my legs based on that. And that's just Bluetooth right now. But in a year, I have to go get my generator switched out so that I can have this more fancy one put in because technology is improving. And it's kind of cool to me to think, well, what if someday there's AI technology there that can fix my nerve issue or, you know, impact something. So I don't know. I don't know. But when I was a kid, if you told me I can connect my phone to your spine, I would have thought you're out of your mind. And now they're connecting their phone to my spine and I can walk. And so, you know, there are good things for it. But with art, I think we're in a real gray area and we're going to be tiptoeing around this issue until a lot of the legalities start shaking out. And it's been really difficult in publishing. It's been hard.
You're so right. And we were talking about this a little bit before we hopped on the podcast, but we're already seeing things beginning to regulate themselves. I mean, it's not regulating itself. People are regulating it. But like, you know, I with the entertainment industry, you know, the Writers Guild, if you look at their deal, it's severely regulates AI. And, you know, there still is an open space there. It doesn't like ban it completely, but it basically makes it where, you know, it's not, writers can't be forced to use it. It can't replace writers and their jobs. You're seeing, you know, the Supreme Court rule that you can't copyright AI materials. You know, you're seeing OpenAI get sued by George Martin and John Grisham and all these huge authors because they stole their work. And you're going to continue to see that play out. And it's certainly, like you said, Sarah, it's the Wild West right now, or at least it feels like that. But like the internet, I mean, I think there will continue to be issues, and that will always be true, just like there is with the internet. But it will, I think, work itself out. And I'm certainly someone who feels a lot of anxiety around unknowns. I mean, I think that's a very human thing. And so it makes sense kind of where we're at, particularly if it financially impacts you at all. You know, if you're an artist whose work gets stolen and that sort of thing. But I do think that, and admittedly a few months ago I didn't feel this way, but I'm feeling more optimistic that we will find a way through this, and it won't just like destroy people, left and right.
Yeah, I think it's scary right now just because we don't know.
Right.
We don't know. It's a lot that we is just totally unknown. We're in brand new territory. But I think it'll shake out, and I think we'll be fine. I think this ship will right itself. But everything new is scary. And
Yeah.
plus we have all these political things happening, and it just feels charged anyway. So I don't know. But I think we'll be fine. I think we'll be fine. We just need to get there. It'll be a journey.
Absolutely.
Yeah. There's some really wild stuff. But Sarah, are there any authors that come across your pile or your editing work that you just like, just makes you happy to see their names pop up when they ask you to edit their book?
I feel like that about all of them.
Yeah.
If they come back to me for another round, then I'm like, yes. No, I mean, return authors are what everyone wants. So for me, it's, yeah, all of them. They're all amazing. But I make sure I do not edit books that don't interest me, because it's like, it's my whole job. And if I have to spend a whole day working through something that doesn't interest me, I'm not going to do as good of a job. I'm not going to be happy. The author's not going to be happy. So I always make sure, is this something I can be invested in? And then if it is, then I'll be part of it. And at that point, man, no matter who you are, if you come back to me, I'll be thrilled. But that's, I like what I do, and I like my authors, and I love being part of it. So...
Do you edit any other genres? Have you edited like a romance book or anything like that?
Yeah, I do edit some romance and erotica on the side. I have one author who made the switch from fantasy to erotica, actually, and she's been vocal about it. So her books are on my list of books I've edited on Goodreads. But most of them are fantasy authors who want their side hustle secret. So they'll like write romance and erotica under pen names on the sly. And it happens a lot more than people think. Like, a lot of authors out there, like grimdark authors who write the bloodiest stuff, have this really intense erotica gig going on the other side. And so, it happens a lot. I do that a lot. So
It's a lot of money to be made.
it is. Yeah, it's the top selling market in the world. And people poo-poo romance a lot because it's easy to make fun of if you're not a romance writer, but a lot more goes into it than people think. And I recommend, I have authors come to me all the time with characterization. Can I get help with characterization questions? And I will always suggest reading a romance book. Because if anyone knows how to draw out personal tension and personal emotional stakes and how to make relationships and characterization work, it's going to be romance. And without the characters, you don't even have a book there. It's just fundamental. And knowing how to draw that tension out is an absolute art form. And it can be extremely informative for fantasy writers to take a break from fantasy, especially if they have characterization issues or questions with how to form those relationships and make personal tension stretch to its maximum, to take a break and go read romance. It's wonderful. So I like working on it because it flexes different muscles. Like, I don't read it for fun. It doesn't appeal to me on that level. But I like when I get the occasional romance or erotica edit because it makes me look at story and character and personal dynamics a lot differently than my other stuff. And I think it makes me a better editor to be exposed to it. So
I always wondered, maybe there's a reason for this, but I always wondered why authors use pen names to write erotica and romance. I mean, because if you have a built-in audience, like if I'm a fantasy author and I have a decent sized audience, wouldn't I want to tap into that audience and at least let them know that I'm working on something else, even if it is under a pen name? Why do you think they keep that secret, or is there a reason for that you can think of?
Well, a lot of times it's privacy, because some of this stuff is really graphic in a lot of uncomfortable ways. And and a lot of people just don't want their names, out about that stuff. And a lot of times it is just a matter of that. I just don't want this group of people to know about this thing because it's weird. And, so, and that's usually a consideration. Sometimes it has to do with like, you'll see it, Carol Berg has published a series under the name Kate Glass. And it's just to target different audiences, I think. I think stuff like that can also be marketing concerns as well. So it just depends on everybody, their calculation.
I think tying into that, I mean, certainly something I've seen is particularly in American culture. I mean, that as an American, I can speak to that more than anything. Sexuality is like a really sensitive topic, I think, for a lot of people. And you see really strong reactions to sex in anything. Some of it, I think there's a real conversation to be had. Some of it, I think it's just like a very level of like prudishness. But regardless, it's like it evokes really strong reactions. I think because everyone deals with it to some degree,
But also, if you're like an author and you already have a built-in audience and then you switch gears, so like say you're a grimdark fantasy author, and then you switch gears and you start writing some kind of erotica that involves, I don't know. And it's hard because you feel kind of obligated to your audience in a way. And so I feel like a lot of the name changing that some authors do also allows them some freedom to write other things without being locked into a prior audience. Like that's one reason for me, completely differently, but that's one reason why I'm kind of like, I'm kind of okay with being an obscure author because I don't have enough readers right now to feel obligated to writing certain things, if that makes sense. So I can go from some weird Necessity of Rain reality thing, and then I can bounce underground to Glowing Stone people, and there's like 10 people who will care, and they're there for it. That's fine. But if the audience is bigger than that, you start feeling certain obligations to certain things. And I feel like, especially when you're switching genres between something like grimdark to erotica, which a lot of my authors do, is you kind of need that freedom to be able to break free from your audience and write about this completely other thing.
Springing off that, but also veering strongly left, how do you define grimdark? This is one of those terms I can never, no one agrees on it. So I'm just curious, how do you, in your experiences, define grimdark?
I define it as whatever someone defines it as when they email me. That's usually where I land.
So valid. So valid.
That's pretty much on all of this stuff. It's wherever you say it is, that's where I'll be. I don't know. It's fluid. I don't know.
It's one of those things I struggle with, like, even talking about my own books, is I'm like, they get really dark, but I don't view them as grim, because I guess when I think of grimdark, I think of nihilism and like talking about like everything being like pointlessness. But at the same time, that's not how like a lot of people define, for example, A Song of Ice and Fire, Game of Thrones, as grimdark. And I can certainly see it, because like there are moments where you feel like, oh, everything is pointless and the heroes are screwed. But I also feel like there's a level of like nobility, and not even like in the like kings and queens way, but like that some of the characters, whether you're talking about like Daenerys Targaryen or Jon Snow or whomever, Brienne of Tarth is like a perfect example where like there is a level of like heroism that is like clearly lionized, and so I never know like where do we draw the line, like Joel Abercrombie, I'm like, yeah, he's grimdark, like sure, but like Steven Erikson, is he grimdark? Like, where is the line here? And like when I'm talking about my own work, I'm like, horrible things happen. Like my first book is structured like a Shakespearean tragedy. Like I'm very intentionally going in and being like, a lot of people are going to die. It's going to be horrible. But I also feel like there's a purpose to it. And also it's only book one and like there's more happening. So do I pitch it as grimdark and like, there is a level of cynicism and like bloodshed and horrible things happening to like good people. But I don't know. It's something I feel very conflicted on and like debate with myself, probably more than I should.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, I'm pretty sure nobody else knows what grimdark is either.
Yeah.
So the market's kind of always moving. And if you fall in that gray area where you could be or you couldn't be, then you can market yourself that way accurately to the right people. And you can market yourself differently accurately to the right people. So you've kind of got the best of both worlds there. You can appeal to all sorts of kinds. It's grimdark if you like this, this, and this. It's not grimdark if you like this, this, and this. and so, I mean, that, for me, that's like golden. But I don't market stuff and I don't know things. So I'm not a good person to come to for advice on that.
Yeah, it is. I think everyone has a different definition of it. I think Fletcher has one of the best.
The beer one.
Yeah.
That's exactly. Yeah.
I do love that. That one is great. Yeah.
I think that's kind of like that, at least in my head, that's kind of like, no one can agree, but that seems like the most kind of like, okay, like that makes sense. Like,
yeah. Definitely.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask one more just like selfishly to try to like learn things question for you, Sarah. Do you have any experience either through the authors you work with yourself working with Kickstarter, or like how do you what tools and stuff have you learned about like funding books, and what are your experiences like with that?
I don't have a ton. I mean, I have authors who have done Kickstarters and then hired me to edit with their Kickstarters. So both of the anthologies I've done recently have been Kickstarter funded. I'm line editing a series for Matt Larkin right now, who just did a Kickstarter. So yeah, it happens. Josiah Rossell, his was Kickstartered, I think. I've done his too. So, but most of them hire someone to do their campaigns, and it looks very stressful. So aside from saying, how's it going? I don't really get involved much. but yeah, most of them recently have hired someone. I've seen a name float around a lot with Kickstarter campaigns. So yeah, and if people are like, hey, Kickstarter campaigns, I've never talked to this person, but I've seen their name 100 times, and they're now my point person. And so I'll send you to them. And I think they do well. The past few campaigns I've seen that they've done have fully funded and done really well within a few days. So,
oh wow,
my guess is, my big advice from what I've seen on my edit side is all of the best Kickstarters that have been the most successful have had a campaign manager who knew what they were doing in place first.
Do you know how much it costs to hire a campaign manager? Like what is that?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I'm not actually that helpful. No, but I can give you the name later if you're interested, and some people that I know who have worked with them that you can talk to. Like,
making a book is expensive. Like, I blew through my savings for the debut, and you have to earn back a lot to break even, and it's
hard.
It's a hard thing. Yeah.
It's really hard. It's definitely difficult. Yeah, I think campaign managers seem to be the thing that I can suggest the most, and I don't know much about that because I've never done it. But I've edited for people who've done Kickstarters. That's why I keep seeing certain names.
Someone's going to email you soon and be like, Sarah, will you be my campaign manager? Say, I'm not a campaign manager. You are now.
I don't even market my own books. I don't know how to do anyone else's.
That email is coming soon.
I cannot wait.
But I really, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. But before we sign off, I was curious if someone wants to get into coloring books, and what is there certain pencils or books you'd recommend to someone who wants to get into the hobby?
Yeah, I started out with a set of Castle Arts pens, or pencils rather. They have them on Amazon. It was like $50 and it came in a fancy case. And that's what I started with, and they were perfect for starting. And then it just depends on what kind of art you like to work on. I like more detailed stuff. So I like Kerry Rosan's because he does a lot of fantasy themes. And there's an artist, Tomislav Thomas, who is from somewhere in Eastern Europe, and he does these incredible dragon books, but like they're only published in Denmark, and so you have to kind of order them, but it's worth every penny. And if you live there, then definitely get them because his artwork's my favorite. But Johanna Basford, she does really good stuff. There's a lot of them. There's a lot of them out there that are great. Rita Berman. Those are really common. They kind of do fantasy, mushroom houses, that kind of stuff. And then just like a cheap set of pencils. Anything works, Crayola or anything else. I started with Castle. I like them. I've gifted my kid that set now, and she likes them. And now I have like 12 pencil sets. And
Wow.
I'm banned from buying more. But they all do something different. And so I'm like, but I want to just try this one. I want to see this one thing about it. And so yeah,
Wow.
there's a lot. It's fun. Art is fun.
Yeah, definitely. But thank you so much for taking. I know you have a busy afternoon, but thank you so much for taking some time of all the other work you do to chat with us.
Well, thanks for having me. I hope I wasn't too strange.
No,
Not at all, no.
Not at all. Yeah, you're welcome by anytime at all. We'd love to have you.
Well, thank you. It was good to be here.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun.
Thanks.
In the meantime, if someone wants to get in touch, whether it's to read your books or to get in touch for editing work, where can they reach you?
My email is sarah@bookwormblues.net, and you can find me pretty much anywhere if you just search Sarah Chorn.
Yes. And Carl, where can people reach you and find your book?
You can buy print copies of Truth of Crowns wherever books are sold, and the ebook is available on Amazon. And you can just find me throughout pretty much all of social media at Carl D. Albert. And yeah, that's me.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you so much to both of you for taking time out of your day, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks for having me.